Unfortunately, most Americans believe in at least one or more conspiracies. For example, 88 million Americans believe that 9/11 was an inside job. In fact, shortly after 9/11, and still to this day, half of all New Yorkers still think 9/11 was an inside job. Go figure. And they vote. Now, the granddaddy of all conspiracies is, of course, the Kennedy assassination, as in John F. Kennedy's assassination in Dallas, Texas in November of 1963. 160 million Americans, over half the population, believe that Kennedy was killed by someone other than Oswald, or Oswald plus someone else. 66 million believe in the cosmic Watergate or the Roswell UFO crash, that the government has something to hide about UFOs and is still doing it. 22 million believe in fake moon landings. We never went to the moon. Go figure. 88 million people believe in what's called the Illuminati. That is a handful of guys, maybe a woman or two, who knows, ask the Illuminati, who control everything in this world. Well, they're doing a lousy job, aren't they? And then 63 million Americans, as many of them, who knows now because the polls are all over the map on this because of the pandemic, they believe that vaccines cause autism. And remember, folks, when people believe like this, they also vote, they make important decisions in life. And if you believe in the wrong conspiracies and that affects or impacts your decision making, you can be deadly or dangerous to you, your family, and your fellow human beings. It's kind of obvious. Not only is widespread belief in conspiracies, we're talking with a capital C-O-N here, like con. It just cannot be true. It's an outright lie. It's manipulation. It's nothing positive. In addition to beliefs in at least one conspiracy at an all-time high, things have become so polarized and predictable that you can even write an algorithm and most likely be able to map a person's political party or other similar identity-type entities to what conspiracy they believe in. For example, a YouGov poll shows that 62% of all Democrats believe that the U.S. government is hiding something about UFOs. And within that 62%, they believe in things like the Roswell UFO crash of 1947, the MJ-12 hoax, and so on. By contrast, 23% of Republicans believe in the cosmic Watergate, versus again 62% for Democrats, whereas only 15% of independents believe in the so-called cosmic Watergate. So again, Democrats are way out there in the cosmic Watergate, cosmic left field, while complaining about the far right and the religious nut extremists. That would be the Republicans, but only 23% of them buy the idea of a cosmic Watergate. The most sane group seems to be the independents. They seem to demand things called proof and evidence, and they're about 15% of them only believe this stuff. So good for them. But the scariest thing about all of these folks, these numbers, is that these people vote. Imagine that. Now, we must admit that there are certainly times where belief in conspiracy seems wholly justified. For example, if you look at Kennedy's assassination in 1963, 53% believed in a conspiracy. By 1976, it was 81% of the country. By 2001, 81% again. And today, about 61% of all Americans. Well, again, because of what was happening in the world at that time, there was a House Select Committee on Assassinations who later concluded there had been a conspiracy. Even though they were wrong, they blamed the mafia as the most likely suspect. Again, a complete farce of an inquiry in many areas, meaning they blew the final verdict for history, destroyed their own credibility when their conclusions were peer-reviewed, especially about the bogus acoustical analysis evidence in that assassination. Anyway, make a long story short, it's understandable why and how public opinion ebbed and flowed. Again, look at the Kennedy assassination numbers. From 1963, 53%. By 2013, 61%. After reaching highs a couple of years, 76 and 2001, of 81%. In 1992, around the time of Oliver Stone, his movie JFK. Again, that was a movie that was based on fantasy, not fact. 78, 75%, 74% of the population are all believing things like what Oliver Stone is saying. Not so much today, but it is still by far the majority of the people. And again, 2013, 2017, these are the last major polls where anybody cared to ask the questions. The answers and consistency, the number of people in the American population remains at about 61%. Again, if you look at the polls, 62% of Democrats believe in the cosmic Watergate, 51% of Republicans believe it. Only 50% of independents believe the U.S. is hiding something. Again, for independents, 32% say no, they're not. And 18% are uncertain versus 15% for Democrats and 15% for Republicans. The people who believe are absolutely certain they're not holding anything are only 23% of all Democrats. Otherwise, 62% are certain. So again, the numbers are very, very interesting because it shows that the Democrats, at least believing in the New Age or so-called progressive stuff, they call it progressive. I think believing in unicorns is regressive, actually. In fact, it destroys the idea that you can criticize a so-called religious nut when you're worshiping imaginary entities from the Pleiades, from a UFO sex cult, and we'll get into that in this show. So both sides have problems. And in the middle of all of this is the public, trying to separate fact from fiction, watching whatever, consuming whatever content, and they end up picking and choosing what they want to believe. They have a disposition for that, but then they're outright lied to. And then you have another dynamic that is really scary. There was a study that was done by Chapman University, and as you can see here, it says we see a degree of paranoia in the responses. It is that about a third of all Americans believed in a conspiracy that they just made up called the North Dakota crash in this study. It showed that Americans are strongly conspiratorial as a society, and it's getting worse, folks. And it is fueled by the media, the internet, the so-called deep web, dark web, and of course America's enemies, Communist China, North Korea, Iran, and of course Russia. And again, there's also the political parties doing this too. They play games. So how does one deal with all of this? How does one separate fact from fiction? Okay, let's see what is behind door number 1 now. And what we're going to do is start with some long promised and long overdue updates concerning some very important high profile cases. So door number 1, it is of course updates. Update number 1, Bob Kiviat's lawsuit. Now people will remember tens of millions of people have read this story around the world. I've seen the metrics and the numbers. Bob Kiviat, the famed Fox producer, has sued several individuals, including some very high noteworthy figures like former Republican Congressman Daniel Marriott of the Marriott Hotel chain family. The issue is consumer fraud and a techno scam. And here's an update for it. I spoke to Mr. Kiviat. He is a guest here via this statement. He is authorized to share with you. Basically, Kiviat's lawsuit remains active. It's not going to go away. Its timeline took a COVID pandemic hit, and Congressman Marriott remains in the suit. Updates will be provided as soon as the court action resumes, and this is the latest info. And this case is important. I encourage you to go to medium.com or to my website, kalkorff.com, and read the explosive expose article, Here Comes the Judge, Whistleblower to Expose CIA UFO Disinfo Scientist, Congressman in Court. It is all about the scam that Silicon Valley entrepreneur Joe Firmage did. And Bob Kiviat was a victim. He's been on my show, my radio show, Cal's Corner. He's talked about it. Anyway, I encourage you to look at the article, and I want to assure you the lawsuit is continuing, but it did take a pandemic hit. So that's update number 1. Let's now go to update number 2. Okay, update number 2, my promised Trump expose book. As a lot of people know, I have an autobiography coming out called What I Think I Know. This is the cover of it. It's volume 1. And it documents the first X number of decades of my life, up to having been to 4 continents and traveling in 27 countries. And as you can see here near the bottom of the book, it says, author of In Russia's Orbit, Why Intelligence Spied on Trump. Well, one of the consequences of this COVID pandemic, since I was impacted like everybody else, I have now stopped this book project. It's dead. This actually is the cover of what the book was, but I'm no longer going to finish it. I'm happy to report that its conclusions were accurate in that, yes, Trump was spied on. When you monitor and you survey somebody and you see what they're doing, that's spying on them. It's surveying them. But this book is not going to come out because it's irrelevant now, thanks to the virus. And the book concluded that the rationalization and justification for spying on Trump was valid because of his past and who he made a point to associate with, not coincidentally. That doesn't mean all the evidence against him was valid, but the overall evidence was valid, and it concludes there was probable cause, justification to spy on him. That's my conclusion. So, as the virus torpedoed that book, what have I replaced it with? Well, as I announced a couple of months ago, I've replaced it with a book, an explosive expose book, called COVID Cover-Up, What the Chinese Communist Party is Hiding. And that's exactly what it does. It exposes what they are hiding, what they don't want you to know, and we'll come back to that a little bit later in the show. In the meantime, let's talk real quickly about the third update, because this one has the interest of a lot of people, and this is going to take a while to get through, but we hope it'll come to conclusion finally next year after also being delayed and impacted by the pandemic. Okay, here's update number 3, the TTSA and SEC investigation, specifically the TTSA fraud investigation. This is now door number 2. To make a long story short, as we all know, the New York Times a couple of years ago ran a cover story which gained them a lot of click-throughs, and it talked about a top-secret Pentagon program to investigate UFOs, which is rather curious because there's nothing about this program that is really credible. And let's go ahead and discuss some issues here. Again, on December 16, 2017, the New York Times published a shocking story called Glowing Auras and Black Money, the Pentagon's mysterious UFO program. Now that's rather interesting because if the Pentagon has a secret UFO program and they have a captured flying saucer, what are they investigating? What they already have? So this was written by 3 journalists, Helen Cooper, Blumenthal, and Leslie Kean, who is a kind of a New Age believer. She believes in the paranormal. And they exposed the stunning news that the Defense Intelligence Agency ran a black budget operation called ATIP. Now, to understand this story, we have to go back and caveat it with this very important point here. Once upon a time, there was a very powerful man in the U.S. government. He was even Senate Majority Leader. His name was Harry Reid, and he represented, of course, the state of Nevada. Now, one day, a wealthy billionaire friend and campaign donor of his, Robert Bigelow, sat down with then Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. Now, Bigelow is a real estate mogul who owns the hotel chain Budget Suites and numerous properties. He also owns Bigelow Aerospace. Now, by the time these 2 men finished their brainstorm discussions, they had agreed on 2 things. Not only did UFOs need further studying using taxpayer money, but so did the overall paranormal phenomenon itself. Imagine that, a donor and your senator, the head of the Senate, agreeing to fund the paranormal and UFOs. That's because Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, not to be confused with George Lucas's Skywalker Ranch, was haunted. Okay? That's why we got to spend the taxpayer money. At least that's what we were told by Harry Reid and people who advocate the myth of Skinwalker Ranch. Because with everything from reports of giant wolves that can't be killed, even when shot at with magnum caliber weapons at what people are claiming is, quote, point blank, unquote, range, wow, that's some really impressive stuff, folks. And then, of course, there's the usual associated phenomenon, according to the folklore, the purportedly mysterious cattle mutilations, the portholes opening up, the mysterious lights, creatures, whatever you want to call it. Just listen to the rumors going around, folks, the tall tales and the stories. Ask George Knapp, he can tell you. He's written a book hyping this. Again, we got glowing orbs, we've got UFOs, we've got aliens, we've got ghosts. We've got a whole lot of stuff going on there, folks, at one single location called Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. And it's kind of like one-stop shopping for everything that's paranormal. Because again, you've got interdimensional portholes, which are enabling space-time travel, all purportedly existing at Skinwalker Ranch. And naturally, every senator, especially the head of the Senate, would want to use taxpayer money to investigate this, since Skinwalker Ranch obviously provides one-stop shopping for researching the paranormal and those alternative realities, right? Well, that's what we'd like to be misled to believe. So what then happens is a bizarre series of events unfold. So lucky for Harry Reid, and especially the American taxpayers, the paranormal and UFO-infested Skinwalker Ranch was owned by Robert Bigelow. This is an amazing coincidence. That meant that investigating the paranormal and those UFOs should ideally be easier, since no one would have to travel far. Instead, the paranormal, all kinds of paranormal stuff, would be waiting for them at Skinwalker Ranch. Talk about being efficient with taxpayer dollars. You don't even need an inspector general. Just show up. The paranormal's there, dudes. That's what's going to happen. See, this is a lot of the stuff that the New York Times left out of what they told you. Now, this gets even more convoluted here, because there were 3 senators involved in this scam. Harry Reid, who's still alive and can be held accountable, Daniel Inouye, who has passed away, and of course Ted Stevens. And Ted Stevens was an enemy of what one might call pork. He was investigated for corruption, was acquitted, but so was Barney Frank. That's not convincing. Anyway, so after agreeing to Bigelow's ideas, Harry Reid meets in secret in a secure room in the Capitol, those are his words, with 2 of his fellow senators, Republican Ted Stevens from Alaska, and World War II combat hero and Medal of Honor recipient, Democrat Senator Daniel Inouye of Hawaii. Now, Stevens knows all about it, Inouye knows all about it, but that was it, and that's how he wanted it handled. That's what Reid said when he was trying to tell reporters how he justified wasting taxpayer money, giving millions of dollars for 5 years to study UFOs and the paranormal to his donor, Robert Bigelow. Now, again, Stevens was he was exposed for being the king of pork. Stevens hated government waste watchdogs. Why? Because he loved pork. And he often called them a bunch of psychopaths, saying they are idiots. So imagine that, our representatives, folks, saying that oversight is psychopathic. All right, so Reid has no shame. Even today, he says, I'm not embarrassed or ashamed or sorry I got this thing going. I think it's one of the good things I did in my congressional service. I've done something that no one has done before. Wow, that seems to be important, to go where no man has gone before. How about the concept of doing things right, folks? Because the question now becomes, what could any private citizen, even a Robert Bigelow, possibly tell the Pentagon about aliens or the paranormal who are supposedly visiting Earth that the U.S. government, or at least one or more of its agencies, doesn't already know? I mean, logically, if aliens are visiting Earth in what people popularly describe as flying saucers, surely the Air Force, CIA, NRO, NASA, NSA, Pentagon, DAA, or some other 3-letter agency would know all about this, since it would be pilots and others who would see and report them. Sophisticated equipment such as radar would be tracking them. Obviously, no private citizen, not even one as rich as Bigelow, has such rival resources, neither nationally, globally, nor in space, to compete with the U.S. or other governments. What Reid did was give one of his closest friends millions of taxpayer dollars for no logically justifiable reason. So, operating 2007 out of the Pentagon put some programs together using this wasted taxpayer money. And then it still gets worse. Let me easily prove this. It's actually Basic Logic 101. If Harry Reid or any other senators were genuinely interested in the truth about UFOs, all they had to do was ask the Air Force or CIA. Instead, Reid took millions of taxpayer dollars, gave it to his friend and donor to study UFOs. For the record, just so you know, the Air Force's National Air and Space Intelligence Center at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, location of the infamous and mythical Hangar 18, an American in UFO folklore, unfortunately, is the official entity responsible for analyzing aerial and space-based threats. UFOs automatically fall under this category. So, Reid says what we decided to do, it would be black money. We wouldn't have a big debate on the Senate floor. They would put it in their defense appropriation bill, $11 million. The purpose of it was to study aerial phenomenon. The money was given. The directive was given to the Pentagon to put it out to bid, which they did, although Bigelow was the only bidder, and of course his was the only one accepted. And of course, in an amazing coincidence, Bigelow wins the bid, the competitive bid, and he automatically goes from being one-stop shopping to now being the only shopper. Hallelujah! So on January 29, 2008, Bigelow formally creates Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies, BASS for short, which is a sister company of Bigelow Aerospace, or BA. BASS starts running official employment ads in September of 2008, and the DIA, not coincidentally, awards him a contract. Now, here's where the fix came in. Putoff and his close colleague, Dr. Eric Davis, play key roles in providing seeming credible smokescreen cover for Harry Reid's UFO project and money grab. Not surprisingly, these two guys are working for, surprise, Bigelow. Now, Dr. Hal Putoff, infamous for his long discredited Uri Geller, psychic and other remote viewing experimental debacles at Stanford Research Institute in the 1970s that he managed, writes the winning bid that Bigelow submits to the Pentagon to, quote, win, unquote, Reid's UFO money. Yeah, wink, wink. Now, the involvement of Dr. Putoff in this affair is very important because Putoff was the program director at SRI who ran advanced sensing techniques remote viewing for the intelligence community, specifically the CIA. Interesting, folks. For decades, Putoff has worked with the heads of the CIA's Weird Desk, first Dr. Christopher Kit Green, then later Dr. Ronald Pandolfi. These three men remain in communication today, albeit off and on. And of course, we don't know the full degree of their collaboration because they don't tell us the truth. So notice that the other references flagged by a simple LinkedIn check about people have viewed about Putoff. Notice that there's other fringe entities like Dr. Russell Targ, okay, who also worked with SRI at the Feld studies. There's Skip Atwater, yet another alleged remote viewer in military circles. Then there's this guy, another questionable hire. Reid's black budget UFO money guy was Dr. Eric Davis, who played a vital role in doling out the resources. Davis was a key subcontractor who also helped himself. He was among the 46 scientists Reid claims were involved. And that's comical because Davis's role served Putoff's interests perfectly, since Putoff is the founder and president of EarthTech, or ETI. Wow, what a cute name. Initials. And not surprisingly, Davis is EarthTech's chief science officer. Wow, talk about nepotism. Whew, couldn't be more obvious, could it, folks? So Putoff and his close colleague, Dr. Eric Davis, play key roles in providing seemingly credible smokescreen cover for Harry Reid's Pork UFO project. Not surprisingly, they're working for Bigelow. This is really bad, folks, but they were allowed to get away with this so far, and it is arguably a crime. It is certainly unethical. So when Senator John McCain officially inquired about Reid's UFO project, he was given a list of what we are told, taxpayers, was scientific papers that were produced as part of a UFO study. Now, when you analyze these papers, what a joke. There's a lot of suspicious stuff going on here. So on January 9th, 2018, Christine Kapnisi, who was the chief of the DIA's Congressional Relations Division, informed the senator, who wrote that the purpose of ATIP, this Pentagon project, was to investigate foreign and advanced aerospace weapons threats from the present out to the next 40 years. She listed 38 scientific papers that she says were produced by the DIA's involvement in the program. And don't laugh, folks, but these scientific papers are some of the evidence that Reed and others claim was collected. And in truth, these boasts were hyperbole. Because, again, copies of this letter and this correspondence among these agencies went to 13 different people in government. And all 13 of these people were being misled. These 38 scientific papers weren't worth the scientific or taxpayer money that was used to pay for them. In fact, at least one of them had already been published in a magazine already. And, of course, some of them were written by some of the guys who were in charge of oversight. That would be Davis and Putoff. My tough gig, if you can get it. So despite all of these watchful eyes, all the top politicians, none objected to all of this. And it was Davis and Putoff who put together this list of 38 credible papers, which really weren't. And they claim they received these academic works after soliciting peers across the spectrum of professions. This declassified list of so-called scientific gems includes papers, folks, on, amazing stuff. Warp drives, dark energy and dimensions, cockpits in the area of breakthrough flight, using organic molecules for automation technology, direct technologies, controlling external devices in absence of limb-operated interfaces, quantum computing, and, anyway, it just goes on and on and on. What does this have to do with studying paranormal, UFOs, or any phenomenon? He said again, Putoff's own paper was called Advanced Space Propulsion Based on Vacuum Space-Time Metric Engineering. It's just, I don't even know where to begin of how much of a waste of money this was. And of course, it was never peer-reviewed and vetted. It was put through in a deceptive way, one can argue, by Putoff and Davis over these 13 different entities in the U.S. government who got this nonsense. And, of course, Putoff's paper had already been published earlier in a journal of the British Interplanetary Society. In fact, Davis himself accounts for 5 of the 38 papers. Traversable wormhole stargates. What does he do? Watch Stargate? Negative energy. Anti-gravity. Laser lightcraft nano-satellites. Blah, blah, blah. It just goes on and on, folks, and was not worth the money. Since it is obvious that Hal Putoff has a long, decades-long, actually, history of misleading people and engaging in pseudoscience, along with some science, but not enough to compensate for the former problems, and then Eric Davis continues to mislead people, as does Putoff, the question now becomes, what does one do with all of this stuff? Well, ironically, Bob Kiviat came up with a beautiful term to describe this problem. He called it Ufolitics. 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 And he's right. Now, what is ufolitics? What exactly does it mean? Well, according to Bob Kiviat, and he should know since he invented the term, ufolitics is when the U.S. government engages in public activities which deceive the public. It's disinformation, or it's just stuff that isn't quite true, or maybe they're not telling you the truth now, but they'll get around to doing it later. Like the way they used the SR-71 Blackbird spy plane to fake UFO sightings, never told Project Blue Book and the Air Force and Hynek about it, and these sightings today are still listed as unknowns in the public knowledge database, even though it's not true. So again, ufolitics includes acts by the government and other governments, as well as UFO researchers and the media, about how they have handled and covered up dealing with the subject to the public. So what does all of this mean now? We can argue objectively that what Harry Reid did was wrong. It was not ethical. Unfortunately, it seems to have been legal. Well, yes and no. And this is where the investigation continues. As many people know, at the last UFO Disclosure 1 event, I revealed that I have been in touch with investigators associated with the U.S. government and specifically the Security and Exchange Commission regarding the To the Stars Academy, which of course is an entity which gained a lot of publicity and was founded around this new series, Unidentified, which is about UFOs and of course has hyped the stuff that Harry Reid and ATIP and others have done. It hypes the UFO subject, which is unfortunate because it misleads people into thinking that more is going on than really is. Let me give you two quick examples here. Art's Parts. Investors were told that it was okay for the owners and founders to spend thousands of dollars buying this supposedly exotic Art's Parts metals. Those metals were exposed as a hoax in 1997. The lab report was published, I know, because I did it myself, meaning in my book, The Roswell UFO Crash, What They Don't Want You to Know, which remains the best-selling expose to date on the Roswell UFO Crash. What it did is Art's Parts is published in there because Art Bell himself admitted it was a hoax. Art Bell was hoaxed. So what type of owner of a company who tries to be credible takes investor money and buys fake material that was exposed last century just so he can what? He's not after the truth if he's implying it's anything else other than a hoax. And so the effort to engage the SEC, send legal paperwork back and forth, draft stuff, it is continuing, but of course it's really not going to pick up steam again until next year. I'm sorry to inform you of that, but that is just the reality of the situation. Thanks, of course, because of the pandemic. But I will keep you informed as information is worth sharing with the public and major milestones one way or another, because we have no idea how this is going to move forward. Okay, moving on to door number 3 now. We reveal what is behind this one, and it is our first guest, Melissa Martell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, joining me now behind door number 3 is another special guest. Her name is Melissa Martell. Melissa is the former podcast and host of the show, Secret Door Podcast. Now she has a new show called Deprogrammed. I've been on it. And it was a real honor to appear on her show, and we talked about the infamous Edward Billy Meyer UFO sex cult. Melissa, welcome to Real UFO Disclosure 2. It's an honor to have you here, and thanks again for letting me be on your show and to talk about the Meyer UFO sex cult.
Well, thank you for having me here, Cal.
So, Melissa, you have a program called Deprogrammed. Why don't you tell everybody what it's about and why it even has that name? What's the significance?
Well, Deprogram Podcast is a podcast where I'm talking about cults and all different type of cults, and we touch on the occult and human consciousness as well. I keep some of those elements there, and it was sort of it's an evolution from the Secret Door podcast, which was more paranormal. And I think in dealing with paranormal, I came to realize that there was a lot of cult activity happening online, and that I wanted to edge more into something that was more solid information and research and dealing with, real human personality disorders and behaviors that were actually taking place online and in the real world, and that would actually be helpful to people, information that would serve a purpose. Mm-hmm. And it's called Deprogrammed because I'm trying to put out information there with my guests that goes contrary to how people are generally programmed to think, and that includes myself because I get to learn everything as well. So the idea that you are actually lured in and programmed by a cult. So I decided, deprogramming is what, people who help people who are getting to cults do. Now, I'm not a professional. I don't have a psychology degree or anything, but it's just the idea that the information that we're telling people can help them be aware.
Okay, well, it's a very interesting angle, but I want our listeners to be clear, and I know yours are, but for people watching this event here, especially for those who are seeing you for the first time, your program, Deprogrammed, isn't just about the paranormal. You attack or handle cults of all kinds. Nothing's off
Yeah.
limits, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's not the podcast is not even about the paranormal really anymore. That's not the feature. It is mostly about cults. I put human consciousness in there because it's interesting to look at psychology, and I don't mind people who are really highly critical of paranormal stuff to come on and talk about theories and different ideas they have. But I want it to be more specific rather than just anybody come on.
Hmm.
Um, so it's mostly about cults, and that's religious cult, political cults, educational things. It can be online social media cults. I mean, almost you could even I've even had experiences at jobs where they operated in a very cult fashion. So it could go anywhere.
Before the recent Wendell Stevens book, there was the coronavirus book that I was working on. And Melissa has agreed to publish it, which is wonderful. And what we're going to do, she mentioned technology, is bring new technology to the book, meaning, okay, you might say, well, why is this book important? It doesn't matter who the author is. I think the approach is important, at least in my view. I've tried to do it this way. So what I'm going to turn into you, Melissa, is a book that basically hunts down the who, what, where, why, when, how of the virus, its origins, how it was unleashed in China deliberately. It was not an accident. It was deliberate,
Hmm.
malicious intent. So basically, we were nuked with a virus. So we were virus bombed. They knew what they were doing. And then, of course, everything that they covered up, what they don't want you to know. So it's kind of similar to Roswell in a sense, but different subject. And I'm sorry I talk so long here.
That's okay. I can't wait to get the book.
So, real quickly, share with our audience. Recently, you dipped your toe into the Billy Meyer UFO sex cult pond.
Yeah.
Uh, I was on your show. Thanks for inviting me. And we talked about the Billy Meyer UFO sex cult, and I shared some inside stuff that I had never really talked about before. A lot of people know those stories, but just never talked about them on the show. What was your reaction to what you heard? Because it was all live. We didn't rehearse anything. We don't do that. We
Hmm.
do it unscripted, which I think is great, and thank you. But what was your reaction to it and the reaction of the Meyer cult followers who love you and you can explain what they have done or not done or stand by, folks.
Well,
It might change again.
you mean my reaction to it, like to the interview?
Oh no, just whatever the whole thing or whatever Um,
Well, I mean, I think the whole, I mean, I think it's really obvious. Let me rephrase this. I think it's really strange that anyone would believe anything about this Meyer UFO. I mean, the images are terrible. And I can understand maybe a little empathy back in the day if people were, thought, oh wow, it's really happening. But it's just it for people to still believe that all this time later with all the technology, it makes no sense to me. So it was really enlightening to hear how you went in there, and I wouldn't have been. I don't even know if I would have been able to go into a cult. So it was really good to hear how you went in there and what you discovered and how you went at it and wrote about it and how people, things are pretty weaselly underneath all cults, as most people know. And I mean, as for the reaction to it, it was I mean, it has like 41 upvotes. It's got probably almost 500 views within a few days on the YouTube channel, so that's pretty good. But it also had got caught the reaction of a lot of followers of the Billy Meyer cult, oh, namingly Michael Horn.
oh yes, good old Mikey Horn. Yeah,
And
sure, Mikey Horn.
yeah, I don't know if they're all the same person. There was multiple people contacting the podcast, and when I seen like 4 or 5 emails and then lots of posts on the Instagram, I thought, okay, this is interesting. And it was all attacking you, Cal. Of course, you're a liar and you're a fraud, you're a psychopath, you're a lunatic. It just went on and on and on. I'm like, I've known Cal for a while. I'm pretty sure he's not any of those things. And the emails were that there was emails from Michael Horn, and then there was emails from this other Andrea. Whether or not that's many, I don't know if it's the same person or many people, but I went and looked on Facebook, and there was a post on this Andrea lady things where she basically was outlining people. Look, Kal Korff is talking again about Billy Meyer. We need to go and show what a liar he is. And people were talking in the comments, and she says, no, our focus isn't Kal Korff. We're targeting the host, and we're going to make her have Billy Meyer on the show. So there was all this go around of harassing, and I got another harassing email. I got like tons of them.
Okay, wait. Stop. You're saying that they said they want Billy Meyer on your show?
Sorry, no, Michael Horn.
Oh,
Did
Michael Horn.
No.
Oh, I see.
Horn.
Okay.
Should I re-say that?
Well, no, it's okay. I just wanted to be clear because I was going to say if Billy Meyer offers to be on your show, when Yazzie has kept him from Michael Horn from debating me and chickening out the last time on Stephen Cambion's show, you should go for it. But if it's Mikey Horn, you just need to tell these bozos the truth that they need to keep their prior commitment to appear as they agreed to, all the parties did, on Stephen Cambion's show. Keep their word first. Then we can all come on Melissa's show and, have crumpets.
There you go. Yeah, no, it wasn't Billy Meyer. Sorry, they want me to have Mike Horn on my show. And well, unfortunately, the way they went about it is not how I would go about if I wanted to go on someone's podcast. And so, and they were calling me a slime bucket, and I'm like, well, I'm like, I don't really want to talk to you now. But they've just sent me a letter saying we're breaking up, and
so they sent, okay, so let me get this straight. They're calling you a slime bucket, which is really spiritual, right? That's very spiritual. We have to agree about that. And then they are breaking up with you.
They're 3 days later, they're breaking up with me. It doesn't make it, none of the emails make any sense. So it's just, I'm a slime bucket. I need to have you on the show. You're ignoring my emails. Then they would post stuff on YouTube comments. She's ignoring the emails. There was post after post. And then there was a couple other emails, one with from an unknown email address that they used, a website that gives you a temporary email, and it said something like, the title was like a threat. It was like something about it's not silent when things fall, or it was some kind of ominous title. I was like, okay, whatever. I was like, whatever, you guys are lame. And then I just put in my email so nobody from that site could ever contact me again. And then today I received heartbreakingly, I received a breakup letter, Cal.
Breakup letter from who?
From Andrea, the one who was sending people after me. I don't even know if I could all be the same person with multiple things, but yeah, they're breaking up.
Mikey Horn,
yeah, they're breaking up with me.
So Andrea, likely not her real name. Oh, by the way, on Twitter, I also posted, why don't you use your real name next time? There's IP addresses. These guys are idiots. Plus, there's other ways to see people hide IP addresses.
I know.
They don't know that. But anyway, they're very spiritual to call you what they do. And, it's typical Mikey Horn. That's why, there's a volume coming out called, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Horn. It fits in. There is. It's coming. I'm going to show it, So anyway. Well, I'm glad that, it worked out okay, meaning this went on shorter than other people have had to endure the harassment. But it's nice that the world can see that they do harass people, that this is a cult. And if it wasn't a cult and they were telling the truth, they wouldn't be doing any of this.
Exactly. And I did a rebuttal podcast, and I stated that right in the podcast. I basically did a tell them off podcast. To follow up.
Okay, so what we're going to do now, while Melissa sits there for a moment, is we're going to put up on the screen the web links to her stuff where you can hear all this stuff. Now, tell people what they're going to hear briefly. There's 2 episodes? There was the original thing, then your follow-up reaction?
Yeah, there is the Kal Korff interview where we talk about your undercover investigation in the Billy Meyer. And then there was another episode called Flying Monkeys, because that's
Yes.
what they are. Whether it's one person pretending to be lots or there are multiples, that's called sending out flying monkeys. So that's what the rebuttal one is called.
Good for you. Good for you. And as you can see on the screen, folks, there's the links. Go ahead and click on them. Please join the group. There's no cost or obligation. And Melissa, I really thank you. And we'll see you soon for everything for the upcoming online store, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this program. And of course, keep collaborating and hopefully do some really great stuff.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Melissa, for joining us.
Okay, joining us now behind door number 4 is our next surprise, and it's this one. It's called ufology or UFOology. Now you may say, what's the big deal? I've heard a little bit about this. Where is it? What's going on? Again, we were ready to launch, folks, with the first book, the Annie Jacobsen expose, which I'll get into in a moment, when the pandemic hit. Rob McConnell is the publisher of Volume 1, and he's in Canada, and of course Canada shut down. His regular schedule was disrupted. He's now operating again as much as anyone can under the circumstances. But the purpose of ufology or UFOology is very simple, and it's very serious, and it's not going to go away. The purpose of ufology or UFOology is to separate fact from fiction. Ufology is a scientific study of UFO data, period. UFOology is when one makes statements or conclusions about UFOs which are not derivable from credible data. So these are the first 7 books. You're seeing them for the first time, folks, of the new series, Ufology or UFOology. And we're going to go through each of the books. We're going to prove why they are important, why they deliver on their promise of solving cases and moving on to the next one, because we're in the hunt for the truth. We don't care what that truth is, but it is important that we find it. Now, every UFOology book has in it some basic reminders for the public, because they need to be reminded about some truths that they are not being told by ufologists. In other words, people who commit ufology also commit consumer fraud, some of them. A ufologist is someone, again, who makes statements or conclusions that are not objectively derivable from credible data. Okay? Ufologists will tell you they can contact aliens, but you got to pay them money. Buy this photo of this imaginary Pleiadian ship that they took, although they faked it. Okay? It's a fake ship, not a real one. So the characteristics of a ufologist is, don't confuse me with facts. My mind is already made up. They're real. Just a question of what planet. Demonization, belittling opponents, positive, negative name-calling, denigration, ridicule, mockery, making ad hominem attacks. They judge people. They engage in research by proclamation. They ignore or dismiss relevant facts and go against their beliefs. They refuse to admit when they're wrong and that it's never their fault. They claim that debunkers have a closed mind and are not credible, even though the word debunk means to separate bunk from truth or fact from fiction. There's nothing wrong with debunking. Bunking or bunk means nonsense. So again, a ufologist is someone who makes statements or conclusions about UFOs that are not objectively derivable from credible data. Now, a ufologist, on the other hand, is a person who studies UFO reports scientifically. Okay? Now, unfortunately, there are many researchers, ufologists, who will claim that ufology is a study of UFOs or the scientific study of UFOs. No, it's UFO data, because the aliens won't cooperate, assuming they are aliens. So once again, these 7 books are coming out. The first 2 will be available in a matter of hours online worldwide. They're in the systems now, okay? And we're going to go over them and explain why they are important. In fact, the first one is going to launch at a special event pretty soon, hosted by Rob McConnell, and we'll let you know the date of that, okay? So again, this is all behind door number 4. This is Annie Jacobsen's Area 51 book scandal. And if you want to learn about it, you can go to my website, kalkorff.com, just spell my name.com, and you will see, of course, what the book looks like. It's available in a couple of different formats. A regular book as a large format as well as a slide book. It's a new format that we're trying, which is a series of slides that you can read and view quickly. And if you click on like the media press kit or sample chapters, you will actually see screenshots of the beautiful layouts in the book, how it points out what ufology is versus ufology, talks about how Nazis make a fine conspiracy, how Mengele escaped American custody, how he was never in with the Russians. The whole Annie Jacobsen thing is not true, and Rob McConnell and I will go through that later, very shortly, when the book launches on his show. This is just kind of a teaser of it. Again, similar data is cited, the polls by researchers showing how Americans are predisposed to conspiracies. We live in a conspiracy mindset type society. And then, of course, the other chapters present real history, which tell you the truth versus what Annie Jacobsen told you or would like you to believe about Roswell, what happened to Mengele, the doctor who was, part of the Holocaust at Auschwitz. He was the so-called angel of death. It documents how Mengele escaped. There's some amazing photos in there because they're all part of history. And real history matters, folks. In fact, it is not a coincidence that the name of this book series is called the Real History Matters book series. They're going to be on different subjects. UFOs, Roswell, famous cases are the first wave. There's going to be other topics as well, controversial subjects, conspiracy subjects that millions of people around the world believe in, especially Americans. And that would be like the Kennedy assassination, Bigfoot, whatever. It's all coming out, fully sourced. And you don't have to take our word for it. You can trust but verify. You can check the facts yourself. And the greatest thing about facts, as I've said many times over, is that anybody can verify them. They don't care about anybody's opinion. So when somebody tells you that's a real photograph of a spaceship, and you see here evidence that proves it's not, there you go. You have to defer to the facts. Volume 1 of the UFOlogy or UFOology series is a foundational title. It exposes completely and destroys the false claims of Annie Jacobsen that she made about Roswell, Mengele, and Stalin all working together to fake the Roswell UFO crash of 1947 in her best-selling #1 book on Area 51. There's even quotes from the scientists she interviewed where basically they don't have things positive to say about her. They feel that they were deceived. They were thrown under the bus, quote unquote. It's all in there. And then we use real history because real history matters, folks. That's the bottom line. To, again, destroy her claims. And it's important that they get destroyed because if you look at the regular mainstream media, they didn't do it. When her book came out, she was basically treated with kid gloves. And she was a media darling. And it was disgraceful. When anybody, I don't care who it is, but especially an editor for the LA Times, supposedly a prestigious publication, is sitting there talking about how Mengele worked with Stalin to fake Roswell and alter children so they would look like aliens, and that becomes a best-selling book, and people actually believe that? Well, that's what happened, and that's why it is exposed and taken out. As both one of the original Roswell researchers, I know damn well Annie Jacobsen's account is false. Her reporting on it cannot be true. And, again, we use real history to destroy it. Now, enough about that. Let's quickly get on to Volume 2 here. Now, this is where things really start to get very interesting because not only do we have these 7 titles coming out, but each one gets a little more intense, if you will, on how it proves its point, whether a case is real or not. Take this title here, The CIA's Conspiracy Against Wendell Stevens. Thanks to people like Mikey Horn, who is the volunteer spokesman for the Billy Meyer UFO sex cult and fraud run out of Switzerland by UFO sex cult leader Billy Meyer. This is the guy who has faked over 1,000 UFO photographs, says they're from the Pleiades, which is not true. He's been in contact with them. It's a long story. But anyway, for years, for decades, the myth has been that Wendell Stevens, the chief investigator for this case, was framed by the CIA and spent 7 years in prison, serving 3 7-year sentences, 21 years total, the 3 7-year sentences concurrently, for the crimes of molesting children who were under age. There were several victims, and there was a prior case that had nothing to do with the current 3 counts that he pled guilty to. So the myth is that Stevens was framed by the CIA. But who started the myth? In this book, you find the truth about what really happened to Wendell Stevens. For the first time ever, you see the court files, because they're not on the internet unless somebody bothers to put them there, folks. You actually see other letters that have never been published before that identify who the conspirators were that started the rumors that the CIA was involved in this. In fact, a copy of this expose is going to the CIA once it starts shipping shortly, so that the CIA knows what they did or didn't do as well, because it's a big agency. So this book exists to solve a series of claims about Wendell Stevens being framed by the CIA for felony child molestation, for being forced to go to prison, coerced, strong-armed, whatever you want to call it, serving time for crimes he says he didn't commit. So all the letters are in there, and the truth is in there. And who's lying and who's telling the truth is also solved in there. I encourage you to get the book. It is incredible. In fact, the original title of the book was The Incredible Wendell Stevens, but it has been changed now because it really does blow open the conspiracy to frame Wendell Stevens as claimed by Mikey Horn and others by the CIA. Everything is fully sourced. The case is literally closed, and you see material from that time from the actual criminal court case files and surveillance stuff that's never been published before. It's here exclusively for the first time. And I'd like to thank my co-author on this project, Steve Cambion. It was great working with him on this. We can also thank Mikey Horn for this, because he's the one that started saying this, and we just had to see if it was true. And all the facts are in there, and Mikey Horn can deal with it. Okay, let's talk about another title real quickly. This is going to be Volume 3. So this comes out next after the Wendell Stevens title, which is out now, and again we'll be shipping in the next couple of days as it gets into the channels here, folks. It'll be available everywhere. This book on the Rex Heflin case, well, I'm hoping that Erica Lukes, who I've contacted, will join me as co-author. I'm waiting to hear back from her. If she decides she's going to pass on the project, that's fine. The bottom line is that the case has been solved, and it's been solved because I was the investigator who ran the trap between Stanton Friedman, a bunch of other researchers, finding the truth about the case, taking each side's arguments for and against it. And what's interesting is that we also have a confession for the first time from Rex Heflin himself about how he faked the photos. He even tells you how he did it. It was remarkably simple. There are lessons to be learned from this expose, which is why were so many in the UFO field fooled by these photos when it was obvious they were hoaxes. So, Erica Lukes has some original material from the case file of Ann Druffel, who passed away recently. Ann was a friend of hers and a friend of mine. She knew about my work on the Heflin case because I knew her since I was in high school. And hopefully there's material that we can combine with the archive material that I have from the original investigations done in the 1980s. And it, again, comes full circle and is a nice way to wrap this case up and move on. Again, I'll hear back from Erica Lukes soon. She's a wonderful person, a very serious researcher. I was honored to be on her show, and I consider her to be a friend. So we'll come back to the Heflin stuff later when it launches. Let's now move on to the next door. All right, now we're going to really kick things up here. We get to door number 6, the Zeta Reticuli Conspiracy. It is the book that's going to come out, unless the time schedule slips, that definitively solves the Betty and Barney Hill case of September of 1961. It is not a coincidence that this date today was chosen to give everyone the shocking news. Now, what I'm about to tell you is true. This is a short version. And then you're going to have to wait for the book to come out along with the software. And we'll come back to that in a moment. Now, to make a long story short, when I was 14 years old, I wrote a 200-page book report on UFOs for my 8th grade teacher. It was actually around 216 pages. I wrote it for Mr. Carlson, my 8th grade teacher. And the highlight of that book was about a case, the Hill case, and how this alien star map that she had drawn was looked at by an astronomer, and it was found to be technically solid. Stanton Friedman said it was evidence that she had been in contact with aliens and had been abducted or captured. And the star map, according to UFO believers, shows a system of stars out there in the sky, the constellation of Reticulum, where supposedly these aliens came from, a location that Betty Hill could not have known on her own if she was a hoaxer, because she didn't know about astronomy, and this constellation is visible only south of the equator. The Hills were never south of the equator. Moreover, according to people who believe in this, there are stars visible in the background which were not discovered by scientists until years later. And of course, there's no way a housewife who doesn't know anything about astronomy could fake all of that. Now, I understand why people would be excited about the Hill case. Let's be honest. If you claim you're abducted and you've got no proof, it's just a story. But if I draw a star map and say, hey, I asked them where they were from, and they explained a few things, and I wrote down what I could remember, and everybody trusts hypnosis, it's never erroneous, right? Wink, wink. And I draw it under hypnosis, and an astronomer looks at it, spends a few years, finds some stars that match, and there's technical aspects to this map which seem to validate the story. That would be really exciting stuff. And I was very excited back then as a young kid to see Stanton Friedman talk about this case when I first met him in May of 1975. I'm dating myself. And then, of course, a year later, I'm writing about this for my teacher, and I'm throwing all the evidence out there in a report that Mr. Carlson, read. To this day, you can ask him about it. He's on my Facebook page. Ron Carlson, that's his name. Former teacher of mine. Ask him about me. So what happens is, a couple months after I finish my report, an article comes out by a skeptic named Robert Schaefer. And he essentially says that the Hill case is not what it's cracked up to be, that the map has now been destroyed. Wow, that's a game changer if true. And now there was a problem. I read that article. It bothered me a lot. So I went immediately to my friend Stanton Friedman, who was my mentor. And I said, Stan, what about this? Schaefer can't be right, and you also be right, because you're saying Marjorie Fish, the astronomer, verified this map. You state many reasons why. But yet, Bob Schaefer, who knows astronomy, is saying, nope, another astronomer named Charles Atterberg has found a better map. And the fact he found a better map means that the whole map is a Rorschach, and it's not proof of anything. So Stanton Friedman, unfortunately, always knew, and this is what is proven in the book, that the Hill case was not legitimate. But he made money off of it. He made his reputation off of it. He also knew that there were parts about the Roswell UFO crash which were not true, but he made his money off of it. He made his reputation off of it. While criticizing the other side, the skeptics, the debunkers, whose job is to separate fact from fiction, that's the very definition of debunking, of having a closed mind, of don't confuse me with facts, it's already made up. So what I told Stanton Friedman I would do when I was in high school, I wasn't even in high school yet. I had yet to get there. So I said, Stan, I'll run the trap between all the parties, since I'm the neutral guy, and I'll find out who's telling the truth and we'll expose them. And he agreed. So I spent a whole year, literally every day, every week, corresponding with everybody, running down everything. And after going back and forth between the parties and throwing everything at each other, it was clear to me that Friedman was wrong, that the Hill case, unfortunately, was just another story, and that the map part especially was not credible. Was not credible. In fact, the psychiatrist who treated them, the Hills, said point blank that in his opinion, it wasn't a real experience, and that Barney Hill himself got much of it from Betty, because she talked her head off and she kind of wore the pants in the family under certain circumstances. She was certainly the most famous of the two. Anyway, make a long story short, I corresponded with an astronomer named Charles Atterberg, the guy who found the other map. And he's right. And then what happened is more accurate data became available over the years from NASA in the form of the Hipparcos orbit satellite, which of course was instrument which was put up there to measure star distances. And once you punch in the modern data, the Hill map explodes even worse. Okay? And you don't have to take my word for it. In fact, I don't want you to. Because here is where a major Hollywood TV producer who exploits the Hill case and doesn't tell you the truth, I'm just being blunt here, may want to seriously reconsider his approach. I'm talking about famed Hollywood TV producer Bryce Zabel. Zabel. I've reached out and contacted him, and I've told him he's going to be exposed. He wrote me back. It was months before I got back to him. I wrote him a couple of times. I've put postings with tagging him in there saying, it's coming. Well, it is. I hope he's watching this video or somebody will tell him it's coming. I don't really care what his reaction is. He and nobody can argue with what I'm about to reveal now. You see, I was in India a few years ago when Stanton Friedman optioned to Bryce his movie, Captured. This is after Stan knew that he was not going to live much longer. He could see the light at the end of the tunnel and knew it wasn't coming from the sun this time. So what he did is he has given every indication that he just pushed this thing, and there was a willing Bryce to soak it up and pay whatever money. And now Bryce claims he's in development of this movie you're seeing here, called Captured. And of course it's going to say the case is true, because Bryce is a UFO believer. He believes in the mythical MJ-12 documents, which have been completely exposed. They're a fraud, and I know that from first-hand experience because I knew Stanton Friedman. We warned him. We tried to tell him he was being played. He wouldn't listen. We went public with that last century. You can't take that out of history because real history matters. So when I'm in India working as a journalist for Daily Post newspaper, I was livid when Stan sold out like this, because it's like, man, can't you even go out with some dignity? I'm sorry. You've got so many people believing in myths like Roswell, MJ-12, the whole dark skies BS. It just like, that's it. So I told him I was going to make a movie called The Zeta Reticuli Conspiracy and expose it. But I thought, I don't want to do a simple documentary. I'm kind of bored with those. I've done them before. I did a documentary for Discovery Channel, Secrets of Area 51 Revealed. It proved that Bob Lazar and others are liars and frauds. There's no captured aliens in pickle jars at Area 51. It's bullshit, okay? And so I start making this movie, and what I decided to do was this. Make it a fictionalized, semi-true account, meaning I play myself years later, overweight, washed up, victim of a abusive divorce, marriage fraud, all that, which is, of course, not far from the truth. You can just ask her in India. She'll verify it if you can find her. But anyway, and I meet these women who are fashion models. And I was a judge in that contest. And one believes in the Hill case and one doesn't believe in the Hill case. And they have this bet, and I'm in the middle. I'm friends with both. I get to know them both. And I tell them who's going to win and who's going to lose the bet. And through that process, as we become friends, they discover things about each other, we discover things about one another, and the audience learns the truth about the Hill case. And what we did is, as part of a package, we put the first and second place winners for these beauty contests that were done by creativators. Wonderful, incredible Indian entrepreneur. He's one of the hardest working people I've ever met. His name is Prashant Bhardwaj, and I'm sorry I always mangle his last name. He also goes under the name Prashant Sharma. He owns Creativators. And the lead actress for this project, the original one, was Upma Sharma. And I want to give a shout out to her because I'll tell you, I'd work with her in a heartbeat again. She was such a professional. She was always on time, always knew her lines. And all I can say is some of the others were not that way. But she was just top. And it was just really incredible. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show just a couple more images here where I show you the star map and I show you how it looks with the modern Hipparcos data, which you'll notice is different from the Marjorie Fish data. But rather than get into all that technical stuff, what I'm going to do is show you a couple of scenes from the movie, The Zeta Reticuli Conspiracy, which has been changed again because what happened is I left India. We didn't finish production, but we finished at least this part of it. And I will be contacting Prashant to propose how this gets finished because I'll be doing some talking in front of the camera to explain why we did it this way, some of the history that went on, and more importantly, the original files from Charles Atterberg, which we corresponded with in the 70s, that Stanton Friedman held and saw the evidence there that the Fish map or that the Hill star map was not credible, are all there, and they're all going to be published in this new book, including any correspondence or answers from Bryce, because it's time to hold somebody accountable for misleading the public on this case. Now, Bryce is on Medium, I'm on Medium, and there's no way that this stuff is not going to come out. In fact, we're just waiting for some software to get released, and then this will come out, and it will change everything. And let me prove it right now.
I'm tired.
What happened?
I read this book.
Oh, great. That UFO thing? I mean, that is amazing.
But I believe in UFOs.
I don't.
Why not?
Because nothing has been proven yet, so something must be there to believe.
Believe. But yeah, this book says itself it's true.
Are you mad? If someone will say this is true, then you'll believe.
Well, yes, but you should read the book then judge it.
Right.
So you don't believe it.
I believe in facts more.
But yeah, this book has also facts.
But there is difference between claiming something and, facts.
But I don't think this author is lying.
I'm not saying that they're lying. It's like they could be wrong.
Let's make a bet.
You have good experience of losing the bet all the time.
Come on, I don't.
Okay, tell me what's the bet.
Yeah, simple, silly. First read the book, then judge it. Believe it.
Okay, cool, done.
Yeah, just leave.
Yeah. Oh, I need to make an important call. I'll catch you soon.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Hi, do you mind if I ask you a question?
No? Okay.
Well, thanks. I couldn't help but overhear your conversation with your friend, so you made some kind of bet?
Yes, she'll lose, don't worry.
Well, I'm not worried. I just think she's going to win the bet.
Let me guess, you don't believe in UFOs? Are you American?
Yes, I am an American.
I thought all Americans believe in UFOs.
Some do, some don't. Depends on the person. Everybody's different.
So why do you think she'll win the bet?
Because I know one of the authors of that book on the Betty and Barney Hill UFO abduction case. I'm also very familiar with the case. I know all about it.
How do you know?
Let me ask you a question. What's your name?
Upma.
Upma. Okay. Upma in Hindi means dish. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you do for a living? What's your focus?
I'm a model.
You're a model. Okay. So let me get this straight. You're a model named Upma. So that means you are a tasty dish. Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, your parents named you very well. You're very beautiful.
Why you guys always tell the woman that you are beautiful?
Well, some men play that game. But when I say that a woman is beautiful, I really mean it. And let me tell you why.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I believe, this is my honest opinion, that women are the top life form on the planet. Now, think about history, all right? Seriously. You have people like Hitler, Stalin, Genghis Khan. They killed millions of people, all right? There's never been a female Hitler. There's never been a female Stalin.
Yeah.
Women are superior to men because they can have children. They give life. They don't take it. Life to a man is like an abstract concept. It doesn't grow inside them. They don't nurture it. They're not able to do the things that women do, and they don't have that perspective. So I believe women are here at the top. Then you have apes and chimpanzees, number 2. Then you have dolphins. And then you have men. And I believe that if women ran the world instead of men, all the wars would stop. There'd be a lot less killing and a lot less violence. That's my honest opinion.
Well, okay. I would like it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So, if you want to know about the Hill case, give me a call, all right? And we'll get together, and I'll tell you all about it. I promise.
Yeah.
Okay? All right. Thank you.
You don't gonna believe it what's happened.
What happened?
A man come here and he left me a card, and you know what? He knows about that all Hills case. And I'm gonna call him.
Whatever. Kal Korff, Senior Manager, Special Advisor to MD, Journalist? Whatever.
So now you've seen a couple of scenes from the first rough filming of the Zeta Reticuli conspiracy and the original plot that I had come up with to, make it more interesting than being a dry UFO documentary of interest only to UFO fans. Wanted it to be of interest to everybody. But let's talk about the star map. What you're seeing here again is the hill map with the accurate Hipparcos data, but it's not to scale, so don't think that this vindicates anything, because it doesn't. But what you will see, which is an exciting project that we're working on now, is we are going to be using artificial reality to bring the Hill star map to life. And let me give you an illustration here of how we can use AR to do this. Before I show you that in a few seconds here, because this is really exciting stuff, I'm also going to show you here the brief bio of my partner, Roy Neal, from Neal Research Labs, who's working with me on this. We're longtime former Apple Claris employees, and we used to be roommates together. In fact, Roy Neal worked with me on my first undercover investigation to go in and bust the Billy Meyer UFO sex cult. He worked with me to do the models. In fact, he led that part of it. And we went up in the hills of the Bay Area with helium balloons, and we test flew the first objects and models to create a proof of concept, and it worked. We later took those models to Switzerland, went to the same locations Billy Meyer did to make his fake ships, and everything was just fine. So what is going to happen is we're going to use AR technology to bring the contents of the books to life. And we can do that with certain cases, okay? And it will be the Hill case to be one of them. You'll be able to see the star map in your living room, walk around it, interact with it, see it pop off the page just exactly like I'm showing you right now, only we're going to use dinosaurs instead of stars. When you get the Hill book, you'll have stars and aliens. So yes, folks, this is real. What we're going to do is simply put QR codes inside our books that will activate a process when you aim your smartphone at some of our interactive titles. And then AR will spring up off the pages, come to life in your living room, on the books, whatever. And it can be anything. And the reason I'm showing you this image here is because our first full AR project is going to be this future edition here, where we're going to recreate the Trent photos and find out whether they're real or not. We have a team. Roy Neal is part of it. I'm part of it. One of the third original Roswell researcher is part of it, and Dr. Bruce Maccabee has agreed to be part of it. We're going to input all that data into the computer, create a virtual reality, artificial reality reconstruction of the famous Trent photos, and we will be able to find out if they're real or not. And how we do that is using something like this. These are actual tests that we did out in the parking lots. And this is where you're able to walk under the dinosaurs because they've been scaled up to full scale. So whether it's a large object far away with a big tree back there, whatever the scene is, we can recreate it all. And these are proof of concepts of this using different pieces of software, different types of models. We've got everything from models of buildings to places, you name it, and we'll be making them based on 3D scans as well. So we believe that applying this AR technology forensically, scientifically to cases is a breakthrough in ufology. It's a breakthrough in any subject. You know, it was the Kennedy reconstruction of the Zapruder film in 3D on the computer that helped solve that murder, for example. But again, look at this here. We can scale up. If you walk out in the Trent photo and see a small model above a ladder, you know it wasn't real. But if you see a large object tens of meters away, then you know that there's no evidence the case is a hoax. So we're excited by this, and nobody's doing it. And even if people rush now to go do it, it isn't going to matter because the science is going to stand under peer review. And when it is peer-reviewed by credible scientists, regardless of the conclusion, everybody wins. And that's what matters. What matters is to find the truth. Now, one other thing, too, that's coming, our online store. And this store is going to be fantastic. For example, if you go to Collectors, you can buy mugs that tell you about UFO cases or subjects. And when you add hot water, they change and tell you the truth. So if you see a Billy Meyer photo, a UFO photo, and you think it's real, once you put hot water or liquid in there, it'll change and show you the string or whatever it was that made it a hoax. Fully sourced and indexed. And you can go check the websites. One last piece of news. I'm happy to announce that Bo Cortez will be joining us as part of our team. He is Mr. Voice. He is the voice of the audio books that are coming out that we will be releasing. This is Bo here. There's so much coming, folks. I just can't reveal it all, and of course there's a lot in the pipeline, but this is a short preview of what's coming out for this round, and of course what will be in the channel available for sale and purchase in the next couple of days. Thanks for joining me. We'll be back again for another UFO Disclosure episode.